Today I'm speaking to Brian Kennedy, author of The Bulletproof Banker. Brian has had an incredible 40-year corporate career navigating the highs and lows of the business world. But his new book is more than just a memoir. This book is described by Brian as essential learning for anyone struggling with stress, self-belief, boundaries, or finding balance in their career and life. Brian, thank you so much for taking time to chat to me today.
Thanks, Arthur. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Brian, let's start with a look at your incredible journey. What prompted you to share this personal and deeply powerful story with the world?
I wrote the book to try to help people who struggle with a mindset like I had in the corporate life, who struggle to say no, who struggle to believe in themselves, who struggle to set boundaries, and are living their lives at 100 mile an hour, and not really knowing where they're going, which was, my situation. And I wrote it to help them, really.
We'll start at the very beginning of your story. Tell us, your book details your journey as a child, your relationship with your mother, your attachment to her, beginning school. Tell us, how did all this shape and mold you when you began life?
Yeah, I mean, I'm blessed. I grew up in a loving family. I had a fantastic mother, a dad, four sisters that were brilliant. I'm a surviving twin. My twin sister Yvonne died at 3 months when we both got pneumonia, and I survived, and unfortunately she died. And from the time I realized that I was a surviving twin, I had promised myself that I would live my life for the two of us, at a bit of a deep level, really. But um, I felt that as I went through my life, at a certain point, I realized that I hadn't lived up to that. And that was part of, when I was going through my mental kind of breakdown, working 84 hours a week in my corporate life. But um, yeah, it came from a loving family, like most Irish families. I don't think my parents ever really got over the death of my twin sister Eva. My father spiraled into alcoholism over a vast number of years, which would have made life kind of difficult for me because I didn't really have, although he loved me, I didn't have a great relationship with him. And in the book, I talk about when he was dying and how that the position when he was told he was dying, that I was the person that was with him when he was told that. So there's some kind of deep learnings in the book that I actually didn't learn anything from, right? So, but to go back, my early educators, I'm of a generation where, school was very tough. My early educators taught me fear and shame and guilt.
Let me just jump in there, Brian. Roughly, just to put everything into context, roughly what year was it when this chapter of your life began?
We're talking about the middle 60s. Okay, so 65, 66, 67, when I'm, 5 or 6 years of age. And, I'm my earliest memory, as I say in the book, is being brought through this big green door in the Coombe into a convent school where a nun comes and just kind of grasps me away from my mother and shoos my mother away. And I'm put into this classroom full of young lads the same age as me. And like every single person in that classroom was terrified. And you're coming from a loving family. You're not ready for the austerity of the austere manner in which these people spoke to us. So um as those classes went, unfortunately the teachers used and the nuns used to tell us that we were silly, we were stupid, we wouldn't amount to much. We were going to be the men of the future, and it was our responsibility to look after the family. And how are you going to do that if, for example, you get your mathematics, your sums wrong, or you get your spellings wrong? And the way they dealt with that was to put us at the top of the class in front of our peers and shame us, and then put you standing in the corner to make you feel stupid. And then when you eventually became emotional in the corner, they would ask you, why are you crying? And what are you, a girl? How are you going to look after your family when you're older if this is the way you react? And what I learned at that very early age was learnings, behaviors that I brought into my adulthood, my young adulthood, my teenage years, my adulthood, my corporate life, and that is that as a man, I had to have all the answers, and I could not show vulnerability at any stage. And to show vulnerability was a sign of failure. And and I'm sure I'm not alone when, if there's anybody watching this or listening to this, I'm sure I'm not alone. And I'm trying to explain to people, here's the way my head was. This is what happened to me in the story of the book. And this is how I've come out the other end as a better man, person, whatever. Okay. So that was the experience of very young in school. And I went to private school, and the private school was even more brutal. The corporal punishment was more brutal. We were still put in the corner, and that's as a young teenager. And you really, really don't know why people are doing that to you, but it gives you. And I built this suit of armor around me where I would not show anything, any emotion, right? And I found that when these people realized that I was a very good footballer or rugby player in the private school that I went to, I was given a pass. I wasn't asked questions in class. I wasn't put at the top of the class. Life became an awful lot easier for me in that college because I was very good at playing football.
You detail in your book how you went to a private school where the bar for education and the bar for achievement in sports is often that bit much higher. Tell us, you mentioned you were given a pass, but how did this affect you in terms of the message it was given to you in terms of the need to achieve in learning, the need to achieve in sports, the need to ultimately avoid failure? What was this message?
Well, you're still trying to learn, but you're not getting singled out in the classroom if you don't know what you're supposed to know. Okay, so there's two things: either you know it or you continue on not really understanding it. But not understanding it means that you're not going to ask a question, because asking a question shows failure. And these people are people who you can't really go and ask a question to, because they may belittle you or give you the time or whatever it might be. So what you do is you stick your head in the book when you come home, and you try your very best to understand it and pass the exams that your parents are working very hard to send you to a private school. So you just try your best to knuckle down. And for us of that generation, school was every day. I'm sure they would agree when they hear me saying, was survival.
Tell us more about your background, the place where you grew up, your family, your friends, your environment. You mentioned about not showing emotion, but of course, a certain amount of emotion is necessary to form relationships. Tell us a bit more about the background, the area, the place. Tell us a bit more about this.
I grew up obviously in Dublin, in an area called Kimmage, between Harold's Cross and Crumlin. And my parents owned their own house, and we were seen as the posh people in the in the area. All the people that lived on that road, and um, all the guys on our road, we would have had a football team, and we would have played in what they called the road leagues around there. And all the other roads wanted to play against us, not really to beat us, but just to kick the posh lads, right, as we were seeing. But I would have played in those competitions. I was only 12 when I got best player of the tournament. In that, so I had a steely determination in my head to be the best. Okay, to be the best at anything that I was going to do. um, I would give it 1,000%. So I brought that into my football, and I brought that into my corporate career. But you see, sometimes then, Arthur, what happens is your mind, you catastrophize an awful lot about what if stuff goes wrong. So therefore, you put in more and more and more and more of an effort. So to the point that when I was playing football, if I was playing soccer and we lost, I'd be pretty devastated, right? If we lost and I won, or sorry, if we lost and I scored a goal, I'd still be devastated, okay, even though I scored. If we won and I didn't score a goal, I'd be upset with myself. And if we won and I scored a goal, I'd be on cloud nine, okay? And that was I tried to get people to understand that that was the mindset that I had, because that's what I was taught and that's what I learned and that's what I brought through these years. That failure was not an option. Failure was not an option. Okay, that's the bottom line for me, and I took that into my corporate career. Now, that's only in my head, and the social aspect wasn't a problem for me at all.
Now, we all make mistakes. It's part of human nature. Failure is, to a certain extent, unavoidable. It's important, of course, to learn from our mistakes and to move on. But as you move from school to college and into your career, how did this affect you, the whole aspect of failure? How did you cope with that in a day to day life? And how did that shape you? How did that mold you, that learning process?
Well, failure was not an option. That sounds really ridiculous. Okay, when you say, but surely you must have had a failure. Yeah, losing a football game was seen to me as a failure, but I would dissect it and see why, what happened, what could I have done better. In work, if I talk about my corporate career, managing large teams, there was a lot of that work where, again, failure was not an option. Errors were not acceptable. Like if I'm lending you a €500,000 to buy your house, and you have to be in your house on Friday, and I've got a load of stakeholders here who have to get documents to my team in order for the money to be able to send to your solicitor. That all has to be done correctly through regulation, on time, so you can get into your house. When somebody makes a mistake and that doesn't happen, life is unbearable because there are 100 people behind you ready to um, take a bit out of your head to ask you why that didn't happen. That was the toxic environment of the financial services industry that I worked for quite a number of years.
Speak to me about your first, let's say, big break, the day you started your first big job in your career. What was this like for you?
When I left school in 1978, my God, it seems like an awful long time ago now. Um, Ireland was in a recession. Unemployment was really high. It was very difficult to get a job, and I got a job in a factory, sweeping the floor and carrying boxes. And I did that to the best of my ability and got promoted to run a machine within 6 months, which was unheard of in the organization. But that was my work ethic. I would do the best I could, and I would get myself noticed, and I got promoted. Okay. And in that role, I knew I was earning good money, but I knew that my parents didn't send me, with all due respect to people working in a factory, to work in a factory. I wanted, I didn't know what I wanted, but I knew I wanted to work in an organization and I wanted to be successful, which meant managing people to me and earning money or whatever it might be. And I went into the civil service and I worked in the civil service until a senior manager there told me the grade I was at, I was wasted. And by the time I'd get promoted, I I should move on. Um, I got a football trial in England at the same time because I was good at football. I had the mindset. I didn't let anything get in my way. And I got offered a contract over there, but I got a job in a bank at the same time in Ireland. And I came back and I took the job in the bank. Okay. So working in the bank, all of a sudden I found myself working in a filing department, which is the opening lowest level job that you could get in the organization at 21, and everybody in the department with me was 17 and 18. And I felt, oh my God, I am 4 or 5 years behind where my career should be. I was catastrophizing the future. I was beating myself up, telling myself, look, you're an idiot. Look, you're 4 years behind. Now you need to move on. And working in that organization, I got promoted within a couple of years to an assistant manager grade in a branch. And through that period of time, I was in 7 armed robberies in my banking career as an assistant manager, where I had a gun to my head, a knife to my throat. And one of the stories I opened the book with is when I get my head slammed into the safe, and there's a guy telling me to open it, and um, explain what was going on. But at no stage during that interaction did I fear for my life. And you might say, "Oh my God, that's what?" What the thoughts that were going through my head was, if I can stay calm and show that I'm a calm person, that will help me get promoted in this organization, because that's what my head thought. Didn't think of my wife, didn't think of my kids, didn't think of my family. I thought about my career, my striving for this corporate success, and not really even understanding what that success looked like. And um, at that point in my career, I had gone for a promotion to a particular job. I think I went for it 5 times, and 5 times I failed. And I was distraught. I could not understand, and neither could some of my peers, because I was very good at what I did. And we just could people couldn't understand. Brian Kennedy didn't get the job. What's going on? And many years, a couple of years later, I had moved back into head office and cut my teeth in operational management away from the retail part of the bank. And I got an opportunity to go and work for the #1 car rental company in the world, managing 8 European countries for their complaints. And I was taking that opportunity. And a manager who worked with me, a regional manager who worked with me, rang and said he wanted to speak to me. And unfortunately, that gentleman was dying with cancer at the time, and myself and another pal drove out to his house, and we had lemonade in his back garden, beautiful back garden. And he told me at that point that he was sorry he didn't promote me all those years previously, but I was too good at what I did, and he kept me where I was. And you kind of go, okay, well, he had absolutely no idea that every time that I failed, I would walk across St. Stephen's Green and go into the Newman Church and throw myself at the altar in front of Jesus and say, help me. What am I doing wrong? Because I have a great faith. I think I mentioned that to you, and I was trying to figure out what was I doing wrong. And in truth, I wasn't doing anything wrong. There was somebody holding me back at that point in my career. So I went on, and I did well in that job, and I moved on, and I got headhunted to work for 2 other banks in the jurisdiction. And make a long story short, working for one of them, I was working 84 hours a week, and I suffered mental exhaustion.
Now, it could well be said that inside every man there's a deep question, a burning question. Do I have what it takes? Am I good enough? Can I do it? For a man who endured, as you say in the book, having your head slapped into a safe and working 84-hour weeks, the driving cause behind this, was it possible that there was a deep question within you that you wanted to prove to yourself, prove to your family, prove to the world that you had what it takes, that indeed you could do it? Was perhaps, without putting words into your mouth, was perhaps this something to do with it?
Yeah, but who was I proving it to, and who was I proving it for? So I'm going back to my early educators, where they tell you that you're not going to be good enough and you'll never amount to much. Okay. And even in my deepest, darkest hour, working 84 hours a week, I could not ask for help. I could not ask for help. I could not show vulnerability. Now, bearing in mind, I'm working in an environment where definitely uh, showing that vulnerability was not was not something that people did anyway. It just wasn't. Okay. Now, if I can just say, I am the luckiest man, one of the luckiest men that you will meet in the world. Okay, because I met my wife when she was 16 and I was 18. And next month we'll be 39 years married, and we're 46 years together, and we've got 2 great kids, Simon and Suzanne. I am absolutely blessed. But I left Martina to look after everything in the house with the kids. She had her own career. She did everything. The house that I'm sitting in today, that has a beautiful garden and a pond and everything, okay, she made an offer on this house before I even saw it, because I was too busy in my head working 84 hours a week.
Mhm.
So, I'm very lucky that um I met my soulmate, and we're still together. So this is what I'm trying to get across to people, as a leader, as a parent, as somebody, the way in which we talk to people, the way in which we can motivate them, the way in which we can G them up, and be proud of them and tell them all the great things that they're doing, is so important rather than telling people that they're not going to amount to much. Be aware of what you say to somebody, because you never know the effect that that can have on their mental health, on their mindset, and the way in which they look at things in life. Because I'm I'm the prime example of the person that had everything in their head and it was catastrophizing about everything.
So, as we have a look over your journey, tell us, what are the key lessons you've learned in life now in your older years? Looking back, what would you do differently? What are the key lessons you've learned? What is the message you would like most of all to pass on to people?
I think I would like people to be inspired by the book, and to understand that, to try to have a positive mindset in the face of adversity, because stuff is going to happen to us all in our lives. It's how we react to it, and how we catastrophize it is what causes us most of the problems. Um, so try to kind of embrace our life with positivity is what I would kind of like to ask people to do, and to believe that if it if you were writing a story like I wrote that book, you're writing the story of your life now, and you can turn the page and change the chapter now. And you can start now. There's never a good time. There's never a bad time to start. Okay, and I still know people who talk about, I'm going to run a marathon, when I said I would run marathons 14 years ago. Okay, that's the difference. Small steps. If we can get people to take small steps, but also to celebrate all your um all your wins along the way. So I just put these pictures together, Arthur. Okay, in that, I mean, they might mean something to some people, but to me, it kind of tells the story. So there's a picture there of me and my mother, where I put behind every successful child is a mum who believed in them. That was me when I was, I don't know, I'm probably about 11, in that early football success and winning a trophy that was almost bigger than me, because of my will to win, my will to succeed. I still don't know who I was trying to prove things against. Okay. But then I went on to do this in those, football and running and whatever trophies. But I wasn't taking a moment at any time to celebrate any of those successes, because I was living my life at 100 mile an hour. I was getting recognized in the corporate world, for the courage in managing my teams, by nurturing people, by being honest with my communication, and funnily enough, my desire to succeed, and for the organization to succeed, and for my vision for the future. Okay, so people are recognizing me as a leader that can do that or whatever. But you know what? In my head, I always felt I wasn't good enough, because of what I was told earlier in my career. And my head looked like that. So if I was in the park, the dog is in the park there and he's enjoying the tree and he's seeing the sunshine, but my head is full of stuff. I could not relax. I couldn't take the time out to be with my family without worrying about all the stuff that was going on in the corporate world. And then I ended up having to ask for help and go for counseling. And the counselor then, told me one time that, what did she say? To rise like the phoenix, sometimes you have to burn in the fire. I think I say that in the book as well. And that was very poignant for me. And then I went and I ran ultra marathons through the wilds of Connemara, and the guy took that picture, and I'm suffering at whatever 50 kilometers in or 60 kilometers into an ultra marathon. But you know what? I'm still able to smile and say hello. And then I went on to do some corporate speaking in organizations, where I tried to get people to learn from my experience. And now I take time out to enjoy the sunshine, wherever it might be in Spain or whatever, with Martina and my kids, which is what we should all be trying to do in our lives today, because we're here for a very short time. and we need to celebrate it. And we need to take time out to see where do we want to be, where do we want to go, rather than just be blindly going Monday to Friday, and you know, and then wondering where did all the time go.
Now, there's no doubt that you have definitely had an incredible career, close to 40 years. But looking back in time, with the benefit of hindsight, what would you have done differently?
That's a good question, and you know, what would you do differently? I'd probably do a lot of things differently, but in everything that I did, that's made me the man that I am today. And you know, without those experiences, I probably wouldn't be the nice, good-looking fella that you're looking at today. So, you
Okay.
know, but there are learnings along the way, and for me, it's around, you know, my self-awareness and what was going on in my head as a man that affected my mental health, that I believed that, you know, I had to do everything.
You detail in your book in quite a bit of detail how a particular point came after working 84-hour weeks for quite a period of time. You came to crash. You came to a turning point where you realized that this is not feasible. I can't do this anymore. Everything just came crashing down for you, and you had to sit back and reassess everything. Tell us, where are you at now in terms of your career? What work you're actually doing right now?
Yeah, the work I do now is very important, Arthur. I'm a mental health and wellness and career coach and a motivational speaker that goes into companies to speak about resilience and managing stress. And it's very, very important. It keeps me very busy. Um, and, you know, if anybody wants to know more about me, they can check me out on LinkedIn under Brian Kennedy APA. And they can visit my website, bjkenomotivation.com.
Brian, it is indeed an incredible story. Brian Kennedy, author of The Bulletproof Banker. Thank you so much for taking time to chat to me today.
Thanks, Arthur. Appreciate being here. Thank you.